Hey there, this is the Resistor Vic podcast. I'm here to get folks thinking about politics as something that's really about regular people like you and me, and to realize that together we can make a difference. I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to The Resistance. This is episode 25 of the Resistor Vic podcast, Us versus Them, and how I'm ready for that fight. But before I get to that, I've got to do the obligatory mention of the Epstein files, right? I mean, every newscast, every podcaster, every content creator on earth is talking about the latest developments in the Epstein files. Frankly, I'm really sick of it. I don't want to hear any more about it on one hand. On the other hand, I very much am looking forward to the conclusion of this drama because I want to know which rich and powerful people, regardless of who they are, which rich and powerful people were going down to that island and doing bad things to kids. I don't want to know the gory details. I just want to know who is involved, and I want to know that they're going to be held accountable. And you know it must be wearing on Trump because he's kind of freaking out a little bit. You got Fox News trying to normalize old men laying with 15-year-old girls. In case you missed that, go look it up. Megyn Kelly saying that, oh, he wasn't really a pedophile. And then you got Ghislaine Maxwell. You know that she is sitting there in that cushy prison environment that she's blackmailed for herself and thinking, well, crap, if I don't get my pardon soon, then all the information is going to be out there. And then I won't have anything to hold over Trump's head, and he can send me back to the real prison. I think that's probably going to be what happens because Trump, he's sitting there thinking, I've got to pardon Ghislaine or she'll tell, but on the other hand, I can't pardon her because it's going to make things worse for me. At the end of the day, I think she's going to end up having no cards left in her hand, and I think she's going to go back to a regular prison, and I think that her welcome is not going to be very good when it comes to the other inmates. Having worked in a prison system for 17 years, I know what she's got coming, and I can't say I feel sorry for her. Anyway, I was talking to my wife about all this, saying how I think this could be the end of Trump. Just possibly, maybe. This might be the final nail in his coffin, if you will. And her response is, there's no way in hell. Trump's supporters are going to stick with him no matter what. There's no way that they're going to walk away from him, no matter how bad it is. And we kind of had to leave the discussion there because, you know, it wasn't going anywhere. We had to agree to disagree. And then this morning, I saw, just released today, Billy Simons Jr.'s latest song. And I thought, you know what? This is how I'm going to end my Epstein portion of this podcast episode. It's about 2.5 minutes. It's kind of dark, but perfectly timed for the news of the day. And if you want to hear more from Billy Simons Jr., he's on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. You can buy his music on Spotify. You can buy it, I think, on Apple, but don't quote me on that. And I get it from bandcamp.com because that's where he gets the biggest cut of the sale. So anyway, here it is. It's about 2.5 minutes, and then I'll be back and tell you why I'm ready for a fight. Us versus them. Enjoy.
Well, if a tree fell down in the middle of the woods, but you didn't hear the sound because you don't hear good, and you got both your fingers in your ears. So I'll hold your hand and I'll turn you around and I'll show you there what's on the ground. And you'll tell me, man, that tree's been there for years. Then I look at you and you look at me and I ask, well, who cut down that tree? And you say, I don't see a single tree around. Well, I say that there is a tree, in fact, and that man you see with the golden axe, well, all his life he's bragged about chopping the shit down. There's interviews from late night TV and on The View, that dude was seedy. It seemed no tree could be too young to fell. Well, that's not fair if I'm being honest. He made it clear when he laid it on us. He probably wouldn't touch a tree that's only 12. Now the devil plays his fiddle while the pedals, they all diddle little kiddos. that society forgot. So long as you own the libs, you can have your way with kids, and we all will just pretend that you did not. See, some folks bought a basket that was red, white, and blue, and they put their eggs all in it, which you're not supposed to do. And they handed all those ivory ovals over to that man who was standing in the forest with a hatchet in his hand. And did I mention that he used to own a pageant full of trees where he'd go backstage to see them without any of their leaves? And he'd always been quite open about acting on his wishes, because when you're good at hedging, you can grab them by the bushes. Is this metaphor too flowery? Is it working like it should? Is it clear that there's a problem with the way he handles wood? And I can't tell you how to feel about abusing helpless children. Some folks look up to heroes, yeah, and some look up to villains. And you may like your beef expensive and your airplanes to be grounded, and you may like to help the wealthy make sure little kids get pounded. And you don't have to like the way I vote or how I look or smell, but oh sweet Lord, look at the tree and just acknowledge that it fell. Now the devil plays his fiddle while the pedos, they all diddle little kiddos that society forgot. So long as you own the libs, you can have your way with kids, and we all will just pretend that you did not. Happy Friday.
Again, that was Billy Simons Jr. Go check him out if you're not following him already. So what is this fight that I'm ready for, us versus them, and why am I ready for it? Last weekend, I recorded on Sunday night as Senate Dems were about to sell their souls to the Republicans and ensure that the sacrifices of all those federal workers who went without pay or were illegally fired, and federal contract workers who did lose their jobs, and people who stood in food lines, all of those sacrifices were made in vain. V-A-I-N, vain. Because the business wing of the Democratic Party was more concerned about Wall Street returns and whether the big banks might lose money due to people not being able to make mortgage payments and car payments and credit card payments. And don't try to tell me it was just 7 Dems and an independent. They were all people who were either retiring or not running in 2026. They were the ones who didn't have to worry about voter backlash because voters have short memories. You can't say anything that will convince me that they didn't have Schumer's blessing. In case you missed it, a couple of weeks ago, those too big to fail banking institutions, they had to borrow $50 billion from the Federal Reserve because they didn't have enough cash to cover their day-to-day obligations. Now, that's not an entirely unheard of thing for the banks to borrow from the Federal Reserve, but they've never come close to borrowing this much. There's a whole bunch of video to be made about this, but I'm neither a banker nor an economist, so I'm not the guy to make those videos. What I am the guy to do is point out what this shutdown compromise really was. A guarantee that federal workers would get back pay and fired federal workers would get their jobs back, things that were already written into law. They didn't get anything on ACA subsidies unless you count meaningless promises to have meaningless votes on the ACA subsidies. And you know what else was not in there? What was not in the resolution? And nobody's talking about this. Any attempt to ensure that the working class victims of this debacle wouldn't take a hit on their credit score because of payments they missed during the economic hostage crisis. 8 Republican senators got a hell of a payday out of it. You've probably heard by now about Section 213 of the continuing resolution that allows senators, just senators, who were investigated in the January 6th and fake elector investigations to sue the government. Now, I've heard Pod Save America and Chris Hayes and a few others repeatedly describe this sweetheart deal as giving these senators up to $500,000 in damages. But all those people are terribly wrong, because the fact is, these 8 senators can be awarded a minimum of $500,000 for every single time their data was accessed. When the judge signed the search warrant, $500,000. When the investigator looked at a call log, $500,000. When the investigator's supervisor received the evidence, another $500,000. Every single time anybody looked at the evidence of one of these senators possibly being involved in an attempt to overthrow a presidential election, turned into $500,000 for that senator, plus attorney fees. How many millions of dollars is that going to cost us? How many millions of Americans will take years-long damage to their credit score because of the shutdown? And what about all of us who had our data stolen by Musk and his Doge rats? We're not going to get a settlement. We don't get to sue. Yeah, after being hung out to dry yet again by the Wall Street wing of the Democratic Party, there's no shortage of working-class Democrats once again calling for a change in leadership. And as always, there's a small army of consultants, politicians, pundits, and blue no matter who Democrats preaching unity and beating to death the circular firing squad metaphor. And that brings me to the 2 points I want to make. Point 1, I am beyond ready for an us versus them election. I'm sick and tired of the conventional wisdom nonsense of trying to appeal to the center. Ever since Bill Clinton brought us the DLC and his third way bullshit, the Democratic Party has been electing Reagan Republicans with a D next to their name, while Republicans have been moving farther and farther towards authoritarianism, bringing us to where we are today. These third-way Democrats, looking for a center that has moved to the right of Reagan, have put us into a fight for the very survival of small d democracy. I say it's time we make people pick a side. Make them choose between the left and the right. Make them decide if we'll stand together as a working class or continue to be ground under the heel of the oligarchy. If Al Gore had ignored the third-way consultants and campaigned on his absolutely wonderful record of standing with and for the working class, we would be in a very different world today. He would have paid attention to the presidential daily brief that George W. Bush famously ignored, and 9/11 might have been avoided. We damn sure wouldn't have invaded Iraq. He could have built on the very modest healthcare reforms of the Clinton administration and built in something much bigger. We would be decades ahead of where we are now with respect to addressing climate change. And millions of Americans today would have good paying, strong jobs in a green economy that leads the world. But he didn't. He went the third way. The election of Barack Obama gave us another opportunity to rebuild the middle class, move us closer to single-payer health care and a green economy. He made progress on some of this, but between cleaning up the economic mess left by W and dealing with the third-way Dems like Schumer, Pelosi, Durbin, Kaine, people that he had to work with in order to get absolutely anything done, he couldn't go far enough. For example, it was the centrist Dems, Pelosi, Schumer, those people. They're the ones who took the public option out of Obamacare. They told us it was so that we could appeal to the middle, so that we could get middle America on board. America had another chance in 2016. We, the Democrats, we had one wildly popular candidate with decades-long solid record of being a champion for Main Street Americans. We had another candidate with a great resume, zero charisma, and who was unwilling to tell us what she was saying to Wall Street in her private luncheons with them. It was the third way DLC centrist Wall Street wing of the Democratic Party that rigged the primary to ensure we chose to put up no charisma to compete against a brain-dead fascist with just enough charisma to convince working-class Americans that he was on their side. And in 2020, we had another opportunity. I mean, Biden wasn't as bad, but we still let the centrist third-way people tell us which way to go. And then in 2024, they said, let's let Joe run again. What could possibly go wrong? Really? What could possibly go wrong? I get so angry when I look back at these decisions over the years by these so-called centrists. I think about how much better off not just America, but the world could be. Maybe Gaza wouldn't have happened. I'm sure that we wouldn't be depending on Ukraine to defend all of Western democracy against a hostile Russia. And if Russia did still try and do something, we wouldn't have abandoned Ukraine like we seemingly have now. And when I zoom out even further, I think about how much better off my kids, my grandkids would be, both financially and with respect to the political and natural environments that we're leaving them with. I'm so done with this self-defeating search for the middle. It's time we finally have an all-or-nothing, left versus right, Main Street versus Wall Street, bare-knuckles political brawl for the future of America. Let's have a left versus right election in which we make those in the middle pick a side, instead of letting the oligarchy pick which teams we're on, like we're picking sides for a middle school dodgeball game in PE. My second point. Right now, in this moment in time, in the lead up to next year's primaries, is the absolute worst time for unity in the party. The unity that some people are calling for is the very same unity that perpetuates failure and prevents new growth. This form of unity doesn't have room for critique or critical thinking for that matter. It only has room for top-down edicts telling us what we stand for instead of hearing us and carrying our voices into the halls of government. If we ever hope to make our nation a place where medicine or meals is not a daily choice, if we ever want a nation where education and those who educate are valued again, if we want to once more have an American dream that includes home ownership, a good job, and the occasional vacation, if we want these things, then today, unity is the enemy. Today, we need to do the work that will make sure every single politician who wins next November had to work his or her ass off to get that victory. Like Zohran Mamdani, the guy Schumer, Pelosi, and the other centrist leaders of our party still won't recognize, but who will have the backing and the power of Main Street New Yorkers behind him as he takes on the oligarchs. There's a large crop of men and women all across this country who are stepping up to lead, but are being held back for the sake of unity. For example, and this is just one of many out there, Karen Breslin in Colorado. She's trying to challenge 73-year-old millionaire incumbent centrist John Hickenlooper for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate in Colorado. The centrist consultant class leaders of our party are propping up Hickenlooper, sometimes quite literally, for re-election. And unity is one of the buzzwords they're using. Yeah, I could talk for an hour about real leaders trying to step up and being held back by centrists in the name of unity. Instead, I say this: it doesn't have to be this way. We can be united next November. The first step for the working class to take to wrest our party from the ironclad grip of the centrist oligarchs is to abandon unity now and have vigorous primaries against every incumbent everywhere. If we do this, it won't be a circular firing squad. It'll be a culling of the herd. Thanks for listening. Good day. Well, folks, looks like we're back at the barn and it's time to call it a day. I sure do appreciate you spending your time with me. If you want to help keep this podcast going by supporting me, you can get a paid subscription on Substack, where I'm Resistor Vic. Or if you're the type that'd rather go to PayPal, I'm also resistorvic@gmail.com. Thanks again.